Okay, this is not the artifact. This is a kind of like some architecture structure about the artifact. Okay, so how this kind of like artifact will gonna happen? So how does, first of all, how does user will kind of like somebody record the artifact? Okay, yeah, and how does artifact will kind of like a publish in my platform? So basically, is this thing when the user wanted to record the artifact, they will kind of like a click the record button. Okay, when they click the record button, then there is a warning screen actually appear. In that warning screen, it kind of like a mention that kid do not mention your name or things or nothing really at all. Okay, yeah, and the countdown is actually started for 10 seconds. After the countdown end, then user have to be click I understood. Okay, which is very much essential by the way, because of that na ki I don't want the user should supposed to be kind of like simply reveal their kind of like a secrets, their name or kind of like a mobile number at the spur of the moment and things and that kind of like a somebody give them heads up information that ki what should you not supposed to be do. So that's why this warning screen actually appear. So when that user kind of like a click on I understood, then recording will gonna start. Okay, the recording will gonna start. In the top bottom screen there is a recording navigation like a pause, stop. Okay, and the top part of the screen is a kind of like a prompt. Okay, yeah, question bank. So basically is this thing that key user is a kind of like a somebody like a when they kind of like a hit the record button, what they were gonna talk. Okay, they need a kind of like a particular topic to talk. Okay, yeah, and this kind of like a question is a kind of like a really helping them to kind of like a what they should supposed to be talk. The question is actually about a kind of like a self-help or things and that user are kind of like a somebody read the question, give the answer. They will give the answer, kind of like a click on the next prompt and kind of like a give the answer to kind of like a make them kind of like a artifact experience is kind of like as much as interesting for the user to kind of like a things and that. Okay, so when the artifact is kind of like a somebody when the user kind of like a recorded artifact for maybe kind of like a 15-20 minute, that user will kind of like a stop the artifact. Okay, yeah, then there is a kind of like option it actually appear. Okay, yeah, either you have to save your artifact as a draft or you have to review the artifact. Okay, what is exactly is this thing? Usually user will kind of like a record the artifact and they will kind of like a click on save the draft, means like that artifact will kind of like a save into the draft, so that user will kind of like a review later. Okay, yeah, but if the user kind of like wanted to review right now, so they will kind of like a click on review right now. So when the user will kind of like click on the review right now, then what is actually happened that key the kind of like whatever the person who kind of like record the artifact, that artifact will kind of like a play and the user should supposed to be listen 95% of artifact, which is very much essential by the way. Why? Because of that na ki it is kind of like a really essential that ki user should supposed to be know that what he is supposed to be talk. Because of that ki usually when you record the artifact, when the user kind of like a recorded artifact at the spur of the moment, that particular person might gonna mention something that might gonna regret if the artifact went public. So it is kind of like some heads up information that ki what kind of like information that kind of like a going to the live and things and that. So user should supposed to be listen their own artifact first, almost like a 95%. Okay, yeah. In this particular process, while reviewing his own artifact, there is a kind of like a multiple buttons over there too. You can pause, you can stop. Okay, you can speed up the process. Okay, yeah, by kind of like a 1x 2x speed and things and that, but you have to kind of like assembly listen the almost like a 95% of entire artifact. After you listen the entire artifact, then you kind of like click the next, move to the next screen, that key kind of like a select the title, whatever the title that you wanted to kind of like a make, and kind of like a select the emotion button. Emotion button means like that what kind of like emotion does it represent your artifact, sad, happy, truth or whatever it is. Okay, yeah, click on that. Okay, and then next screen actually pop up that key you kind of like a review your artifact, and this is the kind of like a title and emotion, and kind of like a button it says publish to the artifact, and kind of like a user kind of like a click the publish, and artifact will kind of like a publish, artifact will gonna publish. So this is kind of like some structure. Now let me tell you another structure. When the user kind of like a save into the draft, then what is going to happen? Artifact will kind of like a save into the draft, and kind of like a somebody user will kind of like a went into the home screen. Okay, yeah. Now when the user will have a time and when the user wanted to kind of like a publish the whatever the artifact that he recorded, which is actually stored in the draft, so he will kind of like a went into the profile, then it kind of like a somebody there is a three kind of like a tab, publish, draft, and save your like a save like a basically stay with me. Okay, yeah. Published published artifact means like that. Published artifact, the whatever the kind of like artifact that he published, which kind of like assembly, seen on that tab. Another tab is a draft tab, means like that whatever the artifact that he kind of like assembly, like a basically is a draft, like a basically kind of like a record the artifact but didn't really publish. Okay, yeah. So he found that a kind of like artifact that he recorded, he didn't really publish. He click on that, and the kind of like a same screen actually appear. Okay, yeah, that he have to kind of like simply listen the kind of like a artifact almost like a 95%. Okay, yeah. Then after that, kind of like add the title and kind of emotion button and kind of like hit the publish, and then artifact will gonna publish too. So this is a kind of like assembly that artifact will gonna publish. Okay, yeah. Now let's talk about the kind of like a stay with me. Like this is also tab. So this is a tab is a kind of like a is belong to the kind of like assembly when that user will kind of like assembly went into the kind of like a home screen and kind of like a scrolling through feed, he kind of like a listen other people artifact too. Okay, and when he kind of like listen other people artifact, he realized that the other people of artifact is a kind of like a really good, really great, really kind of like a something that add value in him, and he wanted to save those artifacts. So he will kind of like click on that save, and that artifact will kind of like save on his kind of like assembly, stay with the tab. Okay, save means what? A kind of like assembly, somewhat something, a bookmark that whenever I wanted to listen, I will kind of like went into the save and kind of like listen his own artifact, the other people artifact, and things and that and that. So that is kind of like a save button for that. Okay, yeah. So this is a kind of like a structure regarding about the artifact, that how does kind of like a user will kind of like assembly publish the artifact in the artifact platform. Now let's talk about the comment. Okay, how does comment will gonna work? So basically is this thing, if the user will kind of like listening other people artifact and other people, like basically is this thing that I wanted to kind of like do the comment. So how do I supposed to do that? So basically is this thing, in the home screen you kind of like see the artifact. Okay, yeah, you kind of like press play button, and the mini player are kind of like at the bottom will kind of like expand, and kind of like artifact is actually playing in over there. You can press like button. Okay, yeah, but in the like button there is a kind of like a multiple things that you kind of like assembly I'm with you things and that to kind of like a resonate. So basically you press that button, then kind of like assembly the artifact is actually belongs to that particular person, kind of like get the notification that this user kind of like your artifact and things and that. Okay, yeah. Now if you don't really kind of like assembly listen the entire artifact, the comment section is kind of like a disable. It is actually seen but it disable. You can click it but nothing really will gonna happen. It kind of like says that you have to listen almost like a 95% of artifact. You have to listen the 95% of artifact. After you listen the 95% of artifact, you will kind of like assembly allowed to do a comment. Okay, before that you are not allowed to do. Because of that key, I wanted that kind of like toxicity will kind of like happen less. Usually people who are kind of like spreading the toxicity, they will not gonna listen the entire thing, and they will kind of like talk things on comment section. I don't want that. So that's why I built this section that the user should supposed to be kind of like a listen the at least like a 95% of artifact, other people artifact, then they will kind of like allowed to do a comment. All right. Okay, now in that particular exo player, okay, like that mini player, that exo player, sorry, that player should supposed to be have a kind of like a like button, comment button, okay, which is as I mentioned, which is kind of like somebody enable after you kind of like listen 95% of artifact. Then there is a kind of a couple of toggle over there that kind of like you can listen artifact by 1x 2x 3x speed. Okay, yeah, 1.5x वगैरह, and also kind of like assembly 10 second ahead 10 second backward. This is kind of like also another thing. Also there is a kind of like assembly that key the particular profile is actually appear like a basically this thing that na ki if the user wanted to see the other people profile, that artifact actually belong to that particular person, that particular person will click and kind of like went into that profile and kind of like simply follow that particular person profile too. If that particular person kind of like resonate, so he can able to be follow that thing too. Okay, yeah. Also the follow button is also available in that player too. Okay, so this is kind of like a things are also there. So, and make sure that everything should supposed to be, every button is kind of like a working really well and things and that. So this is the kind of like an entire structure of the artifact. Okay, so